Computer. All right, why don't we pull up the syllabus? I mean, we already know where we're at, I think, but last meeting. Good morning, whoever just entered there. All right, so we're week 8, October 11th. We're going to cover, again, there's no more homeworks or exams as everything is due today. So to sum up, your grades should be in for homework 1, homework 2, and homework 3. And then also your participation grade should, I think everybody still has a 10. So assuming that, no one runs away today, that should stay at a 10. So I wouldn't worry about that. And I posted solutions for homework number 3, which we can go over in a bit. And then note that the final exam is due today. And as always, you can have until the end of the day, till midnight if you like. And I will probably have your grades in by the 15th because that was the plan. So what day is today? 11th. So tomorrow's the 12th. So I'll have your grades in by like Wednesday, I think is my plan. So maybe before, but just to not overpromise. It's yeah. So I'll receive the homework, the finals tomorrow, and I'll do my best to get them in by the 15th. And when I have everything in, your grades submitted, I'll send you all a note via email. And yeah, almost wrapping it up. So, and then today, again, not going to have any new content. We'll do a few practice problems, but just for fun for participation. But we'll cover the main points of chapters, I believe 16 through 20. And so after that point, we've covered a good chunk of your textbook. I think it's been a pretty good textbook. Again, I like their real world examples. Does jump around a bit, but I do encourage you. I think there's a few more chapters I haven't got through past chapter 20. But I'll probably take a look just because I have access to it. But encourage you to finish off the textbook if there's anything else that interests you. But we've done, 95% of it. So I think we should be in a good spot there. So everyone is in. All right. So why don't we look at, or what do we want? Okay. So let me go over just the one question that we didn't do together for homework 3, just for thoroughness. So under homework solutions, you got a homework solutions for homework 3 that I posted this morning. Maybe I'll just download these. Download. I'm a bit slow right now. Okay, so here are my solutions for homework 3. I believe we did all of part 1 together, all the end of the chapter questions. So I think all the answers should be here, and we went over those in the lecture video as well. So I think everybody got full credit on those, depending unless you missed a few, but we went over those ones together a few weeks ago. And I believe we also went over problem 2, the Hyundai Toyota one together. I put my solutions just in case you want to reference, but I believe we already went through that one. And then that left you with the Nintendo Atari one. So let me just in case there were any questions, I'll go over this one real quick. So assume it's 1985, and Nintendo and Atari play the following simultaneous move game. Nintendo has two pricing options for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and Atari has two pricing options for its new game console. Both Nintendo and Atari can either price at 100 or 200, like price at a high price or price at a low price. Um, because we're kind of assuming these are substitutes, that more consumers would buy the cheaper price one if that was the option. So if both price at 100, each Atari and Nintendo earn profits of $1 million. If both price at 200, right, the consumers have no choice and each earn profits of 5 million. But if one prices at 100 and one prices at 200, the company that prices at 100 earns 10 million, and the company that prices at 200, nobody buys the more expensive one, they lose 1 million. So let's put Nintendo on the left side with Nintendo's profits listed first, and Atari's profits listed second. So here we go. Assume the part A and B. Assume Nintendo and Atari play the game only once. Draw the payoff matrix. So all you do is you could use the template, or you could do it by hand. That some of you did different methods, but Nintendo's here with their payouts, and Atari is here with their payouts. So here are the outcomes where the first number goes to Nintendo and the second number to Atari. So we know that if Atari would have priced 100, Nintendo's best choice was to price 100, right? And if Atari were to price 200, Nintendo's best choice would also be to price 100, because either time they're getting more as a best response. And the same would be true for Nintendo pricing 100. Atari would price 100 to get better than the 200 and lose $1 million. And if Nintendo would have priced at 200, Atari's best choice would also be to price at 100. So with no collusion, the Nash equilibrium would be they both price at 100 and they both get $1 million, right? Now, the second part was assume they play the game repeatedly, but their game's going to end at some point, and there's a uncertain final period. There's a 5% chance of a union strike, which would end the game. So that theta that we define as 5% or 0.05 in decimal terms. And so both agree to price the new game consoles at 200, provided neither company cheats on the agreement, right? And so that would mean for the duration of the game, if they can both agree, like we both do 200, we won't cheat. We both would get the 5 million every time instead of just the 1 million. So what are Nintendo's profits if it cheats? And what are Nintendo's profits if it cooperates? And what will Nintendo do? So we learned that just take 1 and divide it by the probability of the game ending, which we defined at theta. And that tells you the likely number of times that they're going to play the game, which will make sense. So 1 divided by 0.05 is 20. So with the 5% chance, the most likely number of times they'll play the game is 20. And because of that, you know that if Nintendo cheats, right, they would cheat once and get the 10 million, right? They're pricing 200 instead of, or sorry, if this is the agreement, the yellow here, 5-5, and they cheat and undercut, they get 10 million, but it's only for the one period, because after that happens, the agreement's over, right? So they get the 10 million for the one period, and then for the remainder of the game, there's 19 more times they're expected to play. They would only get the 1 million. So, screen went off here once. Okay, and then if they were to cheat, again, the 10 million for once, and then the 19 more times to play the game, expected wise, they'd get 10 plus 19 times 1. So that's 29 million for cheating, right? But if they cooperate, right, they would expect to play the game 20 times and keep the 5 million every time if they keep the agreement. So cooperating and playing 20 times with the 5 million is 100 million, which is a big advantage over breaking the agreement. So if Atari and Nintendo can both agree to do this for 20 times, their expected payout's 100 million. So the conclusion is Nintendo would cooperate because the 100 million from cooperating is bigger than the 29 expected million from cheating, and they would hopefully stick to their agreement and price the game consoles at 200. Okay, so the more times the game is played expectedly, then the higher the likelihood of cooperating, right? Okay, question?
Okay, so 29 million to cheese and cooperate. Let's do that. Not 195 million. No, 100.
Well, so let's see. So basically,
19. Oh, I missed the 5 million.
for the cheating or for the cooperating?
They got 5 times 19, so. 20 times 5, I think. I don't know why I did 19. Okay.
Well, maybe, so here's it's different if they cooperate. So if they're cheating, you have the one time they cheat, and you have the rest of the times that they cooperate, right? So,
Okay, I got that one.
so 1 plus 19 is 20.
Oh.
And this time you have you could do it the same, like the one time they cooperate and then the 19 times they also cooperate,
Okay,
but it's the same. And so, see, it's 1 plus 19 is the 20 times. And here's the 20 times, and because the agreement's the same, they just do the 20 times at 5 million.
I think I just made a math mistake on that. Okay, I see it, it makes sense now.
Okay. All right. Either way, you would have got that they got a bigger payout anyways, right?
I did, yeah.
From cooperating.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The second one was similar to the Toyota Hyundai one, or what was the one we did together? The Toyota Tesla one. Okay. So in this one, there was 2 choices from Mario, the first mover, and then I believe 2 choices from Luigi, the second mover. So assume Mario and Luigi face a multi-stage game where Mario is the leader and Luigi is the follower. Mario goes first and has to decide whether or not to marry Princess Peach. So Mario's decision is marry Princess Peach or don't marry Princess Peach. So he goes first down there. And then if Mario marries Princess Peach, Luigi has 2 choices, either be Mario's best man, in which case Mario earns 200 gold coins of happiness and Luigi earns 25 gold coins. And the second option would be for Luigi to steal Mario's gold, where Mario earns 150 and Luigi earns 75. So that scenario is marry Princess Peach right here. And then Luigi would go second, and his choices are be Mario's best man, 225, or steal Mario's gold, where he'd earn 150 and 75. Okay. And remember that the first number is always the first mover. So the 200, 150, 150 would go to Mario, and the second number goes to Luigi. Okay, and then if Mario doesn't marry Princess Peach, Luigi has 2 options again. He can sign Mario up for online dating here, where Mario would earn 100 and Luigi would earn 25, or steal Mario's gold again, where Mario would earn 50 and Luigi would earn 75. So all the scenarios are here. And part E was to draw a similar game tree like this, showing the first mover advantage. So it was kind of a modification on this one. The only difference was there was 2 choices for each outcome. And so it's similar to the same style, but it was a little bit different because Luigi had 2 choices depending on Mario's 2 choices. Okay, so let's define the stop getting perfect Nash equilibrium, or you can just refer to it as the Nash equilibrium, same thing in concept. So what you want to do is go to Luigi first and go back, because um, you can use like what's called backwards induction to see Mario would see it, look ahead and predict what Luigi would do. And then based on that, Mario can make a choice. So if Luigi were given the choice here, after Mario marries Princess Peach, Luigi could be the best man and get 25, or steal Mario's gold and get 75. So his best um, response or best outcome, just monetary wise, is to steal Mario's gold, right? 75 is bigger than 20. And if Mario doesn't marry Princess Peach, Luigi could uh, sign Mario up for online dating. He would get 25, or steal the gold again and get 75. So you can see that just the way that the game is structured, um, Luigi's best choice to get a higher payout is always to steal Mario's gold, right? In this case, 75 is bigger than 25, and the same here. Now, if Mario knows that, he knows that anytime he makes a decision, Luigi is just going to steal his gold, right? So if Mario marries Princess Peach, Luigi steals the gold and Mario gets 150. If Mario doesn't marry Princess Peach, Luigi steals the gold and Mario gets 50. So these are the two scenarios, still gold, where Mario would get either 150 or 50. Clearly the outcome from marrying Princess Peach gives him an extra 100, probably because there's like a bunch of wedding gifts or whatever that. But his best choice is knowing Luigi steals gold, marry Princess Peach, get the 150, because otherwise he'd only get the 50. So the outcome would be Mario moves first, marries Princess Peach. Luigi moves second, steals the gold, and Mario gets 100 and Luigi gets 75. Okay. So these solutions are posted, but just wanted to go over that one. Any questions on this one here? All right. So just I know I've already received a number of the final exams, but just a reminder that that is due today. Um, this one here. Okay, and again, we went through a whole practice exam that was similar, but um, final chance. Any questions or difficulties on the final that I could answer? Or it seemed like I've already got a whole bunch of them turned in, and we had a good example with the practice. But any any last minute difficulties on the final?
No, thanks.
Okay. Right. So that leaves us to the last item, which is the final lecture today. So under let me make sure all this other stuff is good. So practice finals here. I think I put my solutions, so if you need to look at those as a reference, those are there. We went over that all last time, I believe. Finals here. The YouTube channel has been updated with last week's lecture if you need that. Okay, homework solutions are there. This is the same. Syllabus is the same, and no more homework assignments. Okay. So all we have to do next is do today's lecture slides and any other last minute things. So let's go to lecture slides, week 8. Oh, I'm gonna download this. Okay, let me just. All right, let me pour a little coffee, then we'll get jumping into this. All right, so this final lecture, again, nothing you have to do, action item wise, all the homeworks, and exams are already set up. But I wanted to cover the main concepts in chapters 16 through 20. So this is a pretty high level lecture, but if there's any of the topics you want to discuss more, we can also do that. But first chapter 16 was all about bargaining. And so the chapters were like bargaining, auctions, and then some adverse selection, moral hazard, and I can't remember the other one, but it's in here somewhere. So there's a lot of these chapters were a lot of like, if this happens, then do this, and a little it was a little back and forth and situational, but I think it was informative these last few chapters. And so what you can see is that the authors and readers and lots of economists can use game theory to um, look at a number of these situations like bargaining and auctions and stuff like that. So I know that they introduced bargaining, and there was like a labor negotiation game. And what you've learned in game theory is that it depends on like if you have the same information, if you could reach an agreement, or if someone goes first or second, right? So in this situation, if there's a bargaining, going on between management and a union, which represents the workers, you can see that if there's no, agreement, they just make their own decisions. You could look at it the same way that we did before, where uh, if management were to bargain hard, the best option for the union would be to accommodate, right? That's a bigger than 25-0. And if the management were to accommodate, the best option would be to bargain hard, because that is a bigger outcome than accommodate. And you could flip it around, and you'll see it's the same for management, where if you, I'm just saying us, but if the union bargains hard, then management could bargain hard and get 0, but they'd want to accommodate and get 25. And if the union were to accommodate, the management could bargain hard and get 75, or accommodate and get 50. So what you see is it's kind of a stalemate, and it depends on what the other, party does, and we can't determine it. And so this leaves us to like, you have to kind of predict what the other person's going to do, and then based on that, you could make your decision. Now, what if though, number one, if you could talk to management and be like, let's skip all this, game theory concepts, and let's just both accommodate. If we do that, we both get 50, right? And so that would be the best outcome for the universal parties, is to just make a soft agreement and both accommodate and skip the hard work of bargaining hard. But that's dependent on if they can reach an agreement or not. Now, if it turned out this game is replicated as one of the players going first, then you could, go back like we've done before and see like if the union, is the union's normally making an offer first, because management can, if there's a union strike, management's waiting for the union to offer something, and they can accept it or reject it, right? So in this case, let's say the union goes first and they could offer a low offer or a generous offer, and then management can either accept or reject. So it's nicely in the colors here, but if management was given a low offer, they could accept and get 25 or reject and get 0. All right. And then again, if the union was given a generous offer to management, they could reject and get 0 or accept and get 75. So what you see here, this is similar to one of the homework questions that if management's alternative from accepting is 0, then they're always going to accept, right? So the union would know that if this were the construct of the game, their best choice would be management's going to accept, right? No matter what, because they don't want to get 0 and have no employees and no profit. So the union can offer the low offer and get 75 and then just, ignore the generous offer because they know the management would accept something, right? They got to have their workforce. So, but then I think the textbook, went on to say like, management could be like, okay, there is no, there is no low offer. I'm only accepting generous offers. If that's the case, they like cut off this branch. So it really depends on who, what the agreements are, what the first mover is, and what the credibility of each action is. So it's a bit of a like use game theory to figure out bargaining, but you really have to deep dive into what each each party is doing, and also if the credible threats are credible or not. And a lot of time it's best to when you're given some situation, try to reach a soft agreement, because anytime it goes like bargaining hard or like yeah, lawsuits get involved, that costs money, and that would take away from you know the pie that could have been split between the two parties. So just a pretty good example, I think, of using um, game theory for bargaining situations. And this is not a one for one in real world situations. There's other things involved, but I guess the point is that game theory extends to many different topics, including bargaining. Okay. And then there was a outline in the textbook. There was a couple different um, views of bargaining. So this we would call the strategic view, the game theory aspect. So it's a game of chicken, essentially, where the ability to commit to a position allows a player to capture the lion's share of the gains from trade. A bit, undescriptive in that definition from your textbook. But what that means is, if you're playing a game like this, you have to either uh, know what the other person is going to do, commit to an action, and then it depends on if your action is, if you're the union and you say that you're going to accommodate no matter what, or vice versa, then the management has to believe that action. If they don't, then there would be some other, shares. But uh, the strategic view of game theory, the strategic view of bargaining is think of it like game theory and understand each other's position, uh, if if possible, because committing to an action and being credible on an action or agreement is really the bulk of the concept. Okay, and then the non-strategic view, um, which this is from the end of your textbook, doesn't focus on explicit rules of the game, and it's looking at the alternatives to agreement that determine the terms of any agreement. So what that actually, I wanted to show you one thing from the textbook on this. So, okay.
You think the government's using this to negotiate lockout?
Definitely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
right. It's like, do we believe their threat or not? It's like,
Yeah.
is it credible? It might be. Yeah, I 100% think that the president has someone like whispering this kind of concept this year. Uh, that, that one. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. So I had this. This is too much to put on a slide, but what this shows you is that if you look at so this is a simple example. We won't go through the math, but it makes sense when you think of it from both players' concept. So if player one, oh, it says math error input, but that's player one earns D1 and player two earns D2. So they're sometimes called these disagreement or outside options. And so if they reach an agreement, you can see that like what player one gets um, is conditional on what player two gets. So if they're going to split the pie, right, and there's an offer, um, like A is the agreement, and they offer to split it, but it doesn't. I think what this is illustrating is that. Sorry for all the math errors. I don't know what that's. See, there we go. That's better. That's strange. Okay. So without an agreement, player one earns D1 and player two earns D2. All right. Now, if they reach an agreement in bargaining, they earn A. If the gains to trade are positive, that's if the agreement's worth more than they have the agreement, then they can evenly split. But note that what the textbook is trying to illustrate is that they wouldn't reach an agreement if they already had more than that in the first place. So for example, if like D1 or D2 or the combination was already bigger than splitting the agreement, then they're not going to make an agreement. So that's what you got to, I mean, if someone's trying to make an agreement with you that already has like two times what the agreement would be, there's probably something going on that isn't gonna like they're not gonna make the agreement just knowing that they're gonna be worse off. So what you see here is that it's a little confusing with the algebra, but the concept is pretty fail proof. Is that with the agreement, here's D1 is without the agreement for player one, and D2 is without the agreement for player two. So if they make the agreement and they split it, then you have to make sure that getting the agreement and splitting it is better than what they would have had before. And also, like D1 and D2 probably aren't equal. Like if you're making an agreement with another party, they might have a bigger stake in the pie beforehand. So knowing what they have to offer before the agreement, even though you're going to split it, would help determine if it's a credible agreement. So that's the point of this somewhat cumbersome equation, is to show that if you're willing to split an agreement, it's got to make both parties better off. Otherwise, someone has some ulterior motive, and they're probably not going to do it, because if D2 or D1 was better than splitting the agreement, then what's the point of the agreement? So maybe that is kind of strategic. I don't know why they call this non-strategic. It just doesn't do game theory, but it's another way of just looking at from the other side of your agreement party, and realizing that even if you split the agreement, there might be a incentive or a disincentive for you or your agreement party to not do it based on what you would have had before. Okay. Back to okay. So that was all I had from chapter 16, I think. Any follow-up questions on bargaining that that you'd like to ask? We have four more chapters to go through, but just this will be a high level slide. So any any questions from the bargaining chapter that the class had? All right. Then the next chapter was about uncertainty, which is somewhat useful because it introduces probabilities. And you could probably guess that this concept can also be modeled with game theory. So it keeps going. And what this example here recalls, if I can remember from the textbook, is there was this BBD software decision, this company was deciding whether to develop a high-end product or a low-end product. But so obviously, like, if they developed the high-end product, um, the the sales would be more, but it would cost more to make it. So I think looking at this example here, Cobra would cost 400K to make, and Mongoose would only cost 200K. And they could sell they would make 1.5 million profits from the Cobra, but only 1 million in profits from the Mongoose. But there was also a probability that the development phase wouldn't turn out. So if you look over here, there's what they're trying to illustrate is there's a 50% chance that Cobra doesn't happen, it fails in production. And there's only a 25% chance that Mongoose fails. So what this shows is the expected value of 50% of 1.6 mil plus 50% of losing the 400K for developing it and nothing happens. Even though that this one is more profitable, you have to look at the expectation or the chance that if someone's like, I have a new product that's going to make $10 million, there's probably a high chance that it won't get to the development phase because of all the logistics. And sometimes doing like the simpler one, if it has a much more higher probability of succeeding, would outweigh the risk of the bigger one. So in this case, the expected value of the high product one was only 600K. And the expected value of the low value one or the low profit one was 700K because the expectation of this occurring was bigger than this expected payout. So here's the decision tree is the software is either developed as Cobra, which is the high-end one, or Mongoose, which is the somewhat lower end one. And if Cobra launches, the firm gets 1.6, but if Cobra is scrapped, they lose 400 million. Oh, I think that's supposed to be K. Yeah, that looks like a typo, right? Yeah, so this should be, I mean, yeah, from here, if Cobra launches, the expected profit is 1.6 million. And if Cobra is scrapped, it loses 400,000. That should be matching this. But if they develop Mongoose, if it launches, they get 1 million. If it's scrapped, they lose 200K. So probabilities help determine if just because a product has a better payout if it develops, there are chances or there's uncertainty in the development phase. And if you're uncertain, if you're more uncertain that it's going to get to the finish line, then you got to put a higher probability of that and stick with the safer one. So that's the concept here that they're showing, which I think is a pretty good way to look at this simple example. Okay. Now let's look at the next slide. So you can also use game theory in entry decisions. So here we go. I mean, so what we're doing here is we're adding probabilities to game theory, which makes it a little more complicated, but it helps in knowing if you know the probabilities that you want to use those. So let's say you're deciding to enter. All right, if you enter, or if you don't enter, you get 0. If you enter, there's a 60% probability that you you make the 5 million, but there's a 40% probability that you lose the 5 million, right? And so if you see down here, the probability of the entering and succeeding is the 5 million, and then the entering and not succeeding is the 5 million, because you're the entrant and your incumbent is the one that's been there. And if they price high, that would give you the profit because you undercut them. But if they price low as the incumbent, then you would lose the 5 million because they're just, pricing underneath your price. So this decision would be a lot different if there was a second mover that went after you. So if you're deciding to enter a market and figure out the probabilities, then that'll help you. So basically it still looks like, given these probabilities, the expected value of entering is still $1 million because you have a higher probability of the incumbent pricing high, trying to overprice you, than they do pricing low. And if you price low, then you get the share of the profits. So these first mover or second mover games take a little bit different approach when you put in probabilities. And here, like this one, we're putting in probability of the software selling or getting phased out in the development phase. And here we're putting probabilities on your incumbents' actions. So just more extensions of game theory to model bargaining and also uncertainty. Okay, so one of the things that's mentioned is in the textbook is using kind of statistical models and like high level math to model uncertainty. And so one way to do that is, so if you're looking for the impact of something on something else, it's often important to, if you're uncertain, then you want to get like a control group or a treatment group to impact it. And so as an example, I'll just pull out something that we would be applicable to my Edison job. So, oops. Okay, so treatment groups are, so basically, like as an example, I don't know if anyone's familiar with like the home energy reports that you get from Edison. I don't know if everyone gets them, but basically it's like a report that says like, this is how you're doing compared to your neighbors. And like, if you want to save money or you want to save electricity, you can do this. And the point of the program is for those customers that receive the report that tells them like, you're doing better or worse, or you can do this to save your energy. If they get that information, then they would make behavioral changes. And so the idea is if they get the report, they make a change, and then energy is saved. And so it's very difficult to know, if you send out if you send out 1 million or 2 million reports to Edison customers, how do you know if they save or not, right? So what you do is you send out, you pick a group of people, right? And then you pick another group of people, and what you do is the treatment group, let's say it's like 90% of that group, you send the reports out to them. And then the control group, which is similar to the treatment group, you don't send the reports out to them. And then if the people who receive the reports save compared to the people who don't get the reports, then you can validate the savings, right? And these are often called like randomized experiments, because if your treatment group, in this case, who gets the reports, and your control group who doesn't get the reports, if they're similar, except the only difference is the treatment group gets the reports and the control group doesn't, then that would verify that if you control for other factors like weather and location, if the only difference in getting the reports and not getting the reports is more savings, then you confirm that the project works. So that's what they're getting at here is if you can, if you're uncertain about something, you can develop some kind of control group or experiment where like, I want to make sure that this works. So maybe you want to like, the same thing for like pharmaceutical things, right? So how do you determine if like a drug is effective or not? What you do, or what you can do is, give the full drug to a bunch of people, and then give a fake drug or like a placebo to the others. And if the treatment group, gets, because what you're trying to do is eliminate like uh, bias, like obviously like if a bunch of people get a flu shot and a bunch of people don't, you can't figure it out. But if you can, for some reason, like give a bunch of people a real flu shot and give a bunch of people a fake flu shot, and the fake flu shot, all those people get the flu, then obviously the flu shot works. So that's the idea is if you're able to separate the effectiveness of your product or your drug, or in this case, like a report, then you can control for probability or uncertainty by making a group of controls and seeing if the treatment group is different than control group by only, focusing on the thing that's changing. Okay, and then to follow that up, so this is I just took this from your textbook. I thought it was a good segue from the treatment groups. Is at least part of the blame for the financial crisis in 2008 came to lay at the feet of bankers who mistakenly thought they were hedging risk associated with these complex financial instruments like collateralized debt obligations or CDOs. So the mistaken assumption came from statistical models of risk constructed from random variables and tested on data from a prior period without any extreme events. But when the financial crisis hit, it was an outcome that was outside of the predictions of the model. And what they didn't predict was all these hedges not working and bankruptcy, because the point of this bullet point is they ran a model and their model didn't have predictions on extremes. And because of that, it just said like, if you do this, then this is the expected outcome. What would have been a better modeling aspect, in hindsight, is having like a extreme variable being like, if these CDOs get to, 25%, then chaos happens, kind of thing. So if the high and low extremes are not accounted for, then in a model or an experiment, then if there is a high or low extreme, the model's not going to predict it, right? The same thing with like, there's these like climate change models which predict extreme events. And so essentially it would say like, if you get this much carbon, in the atmosphere, there's this much damage. But if there's like an extreme event, if there's like some, uh, I don't know, like if there's an extreme flood and the flood like takes out California or something like that, then that's the extreme event that would be like outside the constructs of the model unless it's included. So I think the point of this is you can have these prediction models that hedge risk, but that level of risk can change if things get really extreme. And in the case of the financial crisis, there were extremes that weren't predicted because they weren't, written into the model. And if they were, they might have said like, if these debt scenarios or like if the mortgage rate, like the mortgage foreclosure rate gets to like 40%, then this model is going to predict like chaos, right? Now that's what it's easy to point at that now, but that's the point, is that these forecast models are effective if what is predicted is the same as what happened in the past. But if there's something that's not experienced, then that would be outside the constructs of the model. Okay, all right, so the last couple bullet points on uncertainty, and then we have a practice question we can do real quick. So when you're uncertain about the cost and benefits of a decision, you can assign a simple probability distribution to the variable and compute the expected costs and benefits, and that's what we did here and here. Okay, but decisions are increasingly being driven by data analytics. When possible, run a bunch of randomized experiments like we talked about. With non-experimental data, consider how systematic differences between control and treatment groups might generate selection bias. So a couple ways to model uncertainty. The simplest way is just predict different probabilities. And a more complex way, but with probably being used more and more, is to develop experiments and see what would happen if this, hypothetical experiment was run over and over. Okay. Let's do an example here. And again, this is just for fun, or not for fun, but just for doing in class. You don't have to turn this in. Example 17.1. Uh, okay, so we've got here is some probability-based questions. So you're the manager of global opportunities for a U.S. manufacturer who's considering expanding sales into Asia. Your market research has identified the market potential in Malaysia, Philippines, and Singapore as described here. So essentially there's these are the success levels: big, mediocre, and failure for each potential venture in these different countries. And so essentially what you notice first is that if you're making an example like this, or making this yourself, make sure that the probability is sum to one, because you want to capture all the outcomes. So like if there's a 30% chance of big, 30% chance of mediocre, and 40% chance of failure, then you've covered the whole 100%, right? So these three together should equal 1 or 100%. And the same down here. So we have different successes or probabilities of big success, mediocre success, and failure for each of these countries. And then the question is, if the product sells for $10 and has a unit cost of $8, that's the variable cost, right? If you can enter only one market and the cost of entering the market is 250,000, should you enter one of these markets? If so, which one? And if you enter, what is your expected profit? So this is essentially an extension of like the profit maximizing questions with probabilities and uncertainty. So why don't we try to take a shot at this one? So hard to like do things without someone trying to think for you. Why would I? Like, all right, so let's see if I can put this chart into the document so we can have it with us. Okay. And then here is our question. All right, so why don't we start with the first one in the chart, which is Malaysia? Okay, so the product sells for $10 and his unit costs of $8, right? And the cost of entering the market is 25,000. Should you enter one of these markets? So why don't we try to figure out our profit, or I guess expected profit? And our expected profit is going to be the expected revenue minus the expected cost, right? And the expected revenue and expected cost is going to depend on the probabilities, right? So these are our success levels. So there's, trying to look at which ones are, it looks like this one has the biggest chance of failure. So I'm predicting this one, but it also has the biggest big success, right? So okay, so expected profit is equal to, there's a, we'll put the value on this in a second, but so so, so expected profit is expected, so price is not expected. Price times expected quantities, right? Okay. Come back to this one. Okay, so if price is $10, right? And expected quantity is going to be some probability distribution of these outcomes. So it's going to be 10 times 0.3 times 1.2 million. 0.3 times 1. I'll double check these numbers in a second. Jesus. Why would I want to do that? Okay, and then there was a 30% chance of 600,000. And then a 40% chance of 0. So that's going to be just 0. Okay, and let's put all that in brackets. Okay, let's double check. So 0.3 times 1.2 million. Okay. 0.3 times 600,000, and then 0.4 times 0, right? So the idea is that we're just doing this part right now, the expected revenue, and the expected, this is, I'm doing expected revenue, right? We'll do cost in a sec. Okay, expected revenue is price times expected quantity. We know the price of $10. And the quantity is based on this probability distribution. So it's gonna be 30% chance of this, plus 30% chance of this, and 40% chance of failure, right? And then if we sell the number of units that are expected, it's $10 each. So now we gotta figure out this part in the brackets, which is 0.3 times 1.2 million, plus 0.3 times 600,000, plus 0.4 times 0, then multiply it by 10. Okay? Okay. So we'll do it part by part because we got some time. So 0.3 times 1.2 million. Calculator up. $36, 360,000 plus 0.3 times 600,000. $180,000. I'm doing this right. And then this is just zero, right? 40% chance of getting done. Okay. And that would give us 10 times 360 plus 180. 540. Okay. And then 10 times 540 is 54000. 5.4 million. Okay. All right. Did you get the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's our revenue, but we have to figure out that's our expected revenue. Okay. And our expected cost, we have to figure out next. Okay. Okay. So expected cost is unit cost of $8, and then the cost of entering the market is $250. Okay. So the fixed cost, so if we're entering, there's no probability on this, right? It's if we enter the market, it's $250. Is the fixed cost. And then the expected variable cost is $8 times this, not a very good profit margin. Okay, so essentially we would do this part again, but we know it's gonna be 540,000, right? That's our expected number of units sold. Okay, okay. All right, so if sells for 10, unit cost of 8, so now we're doing 250,000 to enter, and then 8 per unit times the expected number to sell, which is 540,000. So that is 250 plus 8 times 442.
5.57 million.
That sounds right. Yeah. Okay, so. Looks like we make a profit, right? If we do the math right. So expected profit is expected revenue minus expected cost. So 5,400 minus 4,070. $830,000. Yeah, I think that's, okay. All right, so that's our expected profit of one of the options. Okay. So now we got to figure out, if there's a higher profit in these other ventures. If so, we choose those. If not, we choose this. So we'll do the same thing. Okay. All right, let's see if we can replicate this with the other. Okay, so the next option is Philippines. Uh, that's for Philippines. PHILIPPN. There we go. Okay, so expected profit is still going to be expected revenue minus expected costs. Expected revenue is going to be price times expected quantity. Price is going to be the same, right? And what we got to do is figure out this part. So it's going to be 0.3 times a million. Okay. And then 0.5 times 320,000. Okay, and then what's the rest? It's gonna be 0, but just 0.2 times 0. Okay. All right, so this would be 300,000, right? And then this would be 0.5 times 320. 160,000.
Yeah, I think that was
Yeah, because they're half.
pretty easy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right. So expected revenue here is
Next one's
10,000.
0.
Yeah. 300,000 plus 160,000 plus 0. Okay. So that's going to be 10 times 460,000.
4.8 million.
4.8 million,
Oh, wait, no, it's not 4.8.
4.6, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 4.6 million. Now expected cost for this one would be 250. So use times 460,000. 250 plus 8 times 460,000 is
3.93.
3.9. Times 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what's our profit from this venture? It's 4.6 million expected profits minus 3. All right, so thus far, it looks like the other one is a better option, right? Okay. All right, one more to do, but the point is we're using these probabilities to figure it out. So this one has the highest chance of success, but the lowest payout. All right, Singapore. So let me get an error on that. All right, expected profit, expected revenue, and expected price cost. Okay, so expected revenue is going to be, so it's still going to be the 10 and the 8, and this is the fixed cost. Okay. All right, so 10 times 0.7 times 700,000. And 0.2 times 400,000. And looks like it's going to be 0.1 times 0. So low chance of failure for this one, but lower returns. Okay, so this would be 0.7 times 700,000. Might be 49, 490,000.
Bingo.
Right? And then 0.2 times 400. It's gonna be 80,000. And that's 0. All right, so we got 10 times 570,000. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then 5.7 million. Okay, expected costs are the fixed costs and the 8 times the 570,000. Okay. So 250 plus. We can't do this one, right? 8 times.
Or 4,829.
Or 810. Yep. Okay, expected profits are gonna be 5,700,000 minus 4,000,008. Okay. All right. Okay, so this is our. Okay, so which market are we gonna enter?
Last one.
Yeah, Singapore, right, is the biggest expected profit. And that's probably because the chance of success is much higher. Even though it's higher number of units sold, but we only have a 10% chance of failing. And a 70% chance of the big outcome, so that looks like the winner. So we would. You enter one of these markets, if so, which one? Right, so this one, Singapore. Good. All right, any questions on uncertainty? Okay. All right, next one, why don't we take a break? Yeah, I have a few more slides. Why don't we take a quick break and come back at like 10. All right, I think we're good to resume here. Everyone's back. Looks like it. All right, so that concludes uncertainty. There were a few more items or chapters, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so there was a whole chapter 18 on auctions. I read through it. I didn't really have a whole lot to discuss because it was more just a read-only chapter and really not my strong suit is analyzing auctions. But if anybody read chapter 8 or had any questions on auctions, I put that in here as a placeholder. So were there any additional items that of interest that you all wanted to discuss for auctions? Now we can skip to the next chapter, but just wanted to, all right, so that chapter, again, I'm not an expert on auctions. I think it was a pretty informative chapter just to, bridge to the next one, but I didn't have any specific things that weren't already just discussed in the chapter. So chapter 18 auctions, and we've spent a couple minutes on it, but we'll move on to adverse selection and then moral hazard. All right. Okay. So some examples of adverse selection. And so I had I'm going to jump a few bullet points ahead just to frame adverse selection versus moral hazard. So they're both due to lack of information. So just focus on this bullet point and then we'll go back a bit. But so moral hazard and which we're going to talk about in the next chapter and adverse selection are similar. They both arise from information asymmetry, which means you don't have all the information that you need to make a decision without uncertainty. So adverse selection arises from hidden information about the type of individuals you're dealing with, like you don't know their full story or how they're going to behave. And moral hazard arises from hidden actions. So they're similar, but adverse selection is you don't have all the information about the individual or party. And moral hazard is you don't have all the information on the actions that they're going to take. Okay, so backtracking. Some common examples of adverse selection are insurance companies and low-risk consumers. So basically, insurance companies don't know the full information of their, so just take like auto insurance, right? They don't know all the information about their drivers. If they knew that they were like had a tendency to get into an accident in the next year, they'd probably raise their premium. And if they knew that the driver would never get into an accident or had no risk, then they would charge them a lower one. But because the information they have is somewhere in the middle, all they can do is kind of screen and say like, have you ever been in an accident? What's your household income? Are you married? Kind of things, and use categories or screening sections to determine what their premium should be, but they don't know the full, risk of their customers because they don't know them, right? They have all these customers, they don't know. And so basically like if someone gets into a lot of accidents, their insurance was underpriced because they didn't take that into consideration. And if you never get into an accident, you're, probably for a good reason, you're overpaying because they don't need to insure you. But because the insurance companies don't know the full, set of information on their customers, they have to use, categories and best guesses to do that. Okay, same with car buyers and sellers of cars is you don't know, and this is more for used cars, I think it's, if you ever bought a used car, you don't really know the full back information on it. You know what it looks like, you know how many miles it has, you know what kind of car it is, but it could be like one step away from, the engine blowing out, or maybe there's like some leakage you don't know, or maybe the axle's been like repaired and dented, but if you don't have all that information, you can just, you're basically looking at like the blue book value or what the person tells you. But I guess the point is, adverse selection is lots of cars are overpriced or underpriced because the only person that has the true information is the buyer. And so most likely, if you're buying a used car from someone, you're gonna be either breaking even or overpaying because they have more information than you do, right? And then employees and hardworking employers and hardworking employees. So this, I think the example in the textbook was had to do, there was an example which I can't remember the company, but it was, if you recall, there was like a training process, and there was a company procedure that once they got through like a certain point, they would pay some employees, they would make an offer saying like, we'll give you $5,000 to leave to quit today. And the screening process was like the employers that took that, they weren't good workers anyways, and so that screened them out. And so doing different ways to, when you hire someone as an employee, uh, you don't know how they're gonna, you don't know how they're gonna be as an employee. You don't know if they're, uh, you only have what you get in an interview or on a resume or what they tell you. But you really have no idea if they're gonna be over exceed or under exceed or just be exactly what you thought. So I think the whole section here is like, it's hard to make decisions when you don't have the full set of information on individuals or companies. And that's the problem, or that's the issue of adverse selection. Okay. So just to summarize, adverse selection is a problem that arises from information asymmetry or hidden information. And one party knows it, one party doesn't know it or knows part of it. You can use screening, is an uninformed party's effort to learn the information that the more informed party has. Successful screens have the characteristic that it's unprofitable for bad types to mimic the good behavior. Another well-known example of screening is like education is a big, or I guess that's a signal. Screening is more what we talked about with the insurance company. And then signaling is an informed party's effort to communicate information to the less informed party. Every successful screen can also be used as a signal. So one of the major signals that's always talked about is education. And basically the idea is that you're in your future job that you get after this or after a normal college education, you're unlikely going to use every single thing you learned in the classes, right? It's just not going to be, you're not going to need, you're going to use some of it, or hopefully a lot of it, but depending on the job you have, you won't likely use every single piece and textbook and homework and stuff like that. But what your degree is going to do is provide a signal to your employers, potential employers, saying like, I don't, this potential employee, I don't need to use every single thing in his resume, but the degree or what you have in your resume from finishing the course is a signal that you're going to be a good worker. So it's not just, so your degree or your education or your uh, academia accolades are not only showing what you can do or what you've learned, it's showing that like if you succeeded at this, there's a higher chance you'll succeed at your job. Okay. Okay, couple more examples. So let's see what I flagged here. 19.1 and 19.6. Okay. I see that. Well, I like this one. So in the 1900s, car leasing was very popular in the US. A consumer would lease a car from the manufacturer for a set term, usually 2 years, and then have the option of keeping the car. All right. You know, it's still a thing, when it's in the 1990s. We lease a car. If the consumer decided to keep the car, the customer would pay a price to the manufacturer, the residual value, which was approximately 60% of the new car price. So you, over 2 years, you pay, via a loan, the 40%, over time, and then if you want to keep the car, you pay the extra 60%. So the manufacturer would then sell the return cars at auction, right? The car that was returned after the lease. And in 1999, the manufacturer lost an average of 480 on each car returned. The auction price was on average 480 less than the residual value. So, if the residual value's 20,000, they're losing this much, but they're not making the return on the residual. So the question is, why was the manufacturer losing money on this program? And B, what should the manufacturer do to stop losing money? So based on what we learned, who has all the information about the vehicle? The manufacturer or the buyer? The manufacturer, right? The manufacturer knows, can do a full inspection. They got it, they sold the new car, they can tell what's happened. And the person who's buying the car, can only take it as like, what the price is. And so essentially what I think this is saying is that if the consumer or the potential buyer wasn't given or didn't have a full set of information to make it worth the buying a used car at that price. And what they would do is either buy their own car, or lease another car and sell it back or lease it for 40%. But I believe, I didn't look at the solution manual, but the manufacturer was losing money because they had the full set of information and the customer did not. And what they should probably do is, if they want to make a profit, they have to, give the consumer or potential buyer more information and be like, look, this car only has 5,000 miles on it. There's nothing wrong with it. Here's the report. Here's the, here's the previous owner's number. Call them, tell them, they'll tell you it's a great car. But if they're not convinced that this is the true price, then either it's not, or the car manufacturer has to provide them information to show it is, right? So there was a moral hazard, what's this, adverse selection problem where the manufacturer had all the information and didn't do a sufficient enough job to give it to and it's an auction, right? If you're an auction, you're just like, here's a car, just sell it for, you don't have time to get all that information, right? It's just a marketplace where things happen so quickly, and there's no way you can make a full decision in an auction, or at least I can't. I've been to a number of auctions because my wife is on a couple like art boards in the community, and when they have these galas and auctions, I'm like, I don't know how much that's worth. I'm like, I've had a couple of glasses of wine. I'm not buying that. So I just, when they tell you the value, I'm like, are we sure that's worth? Why is it starting? So anyway, so auctions are auction. Okay. Auctions are a good place to look for adverse selection, because most times the buyer or potential buyer doesn't have the information needed to make the appropriate decision. And so you either have to have like insider information, or just, hope you're getting a good deal. But chances are in any auction that the person that knows the least is the buyer, right? Okay. Last one I wanted to look at, is this 19.6? 19.6. Okay. What this one is. All right. Oh, this is not, okay. So you need to hire some new employees to staff your startup venture. You know that potential employees are distributed throughout the population that follows, but you can't distinguish among them. All right. So given these probabilities, there's the employee could be worth anywhere from 5,000, 50,000 to 60,000, but there's only a 25% chance that you get that person, right? And so what's the expected value of 5 employees that you hire, right? So all we're gonna do here is take the expected value of an employee and then multiply it by 5, right? We probably don't even, I can just do this one on the calculator. Well, we're almost done, so I'll do this one. Same Word document. Okay, so and the question is, what's the expected value of 5 employees you hire? Okay, so let's first calculate the expected value of 1 employee, which would be 0.25 times 50,000 plus they're all 0.25s, 60,000 plus, but we could also, oh, oops. These 70,000 plus okay. So if we wanted to, we could just this knowing that everything is a 25% chance, we could take that out like like we did in algebra, and it would be 25% of these things together. Okay, oops. So 25% of 50,000 plus 60,000 plus 70,000 plus 80,000, right? Okay, the expected value of an employee is, let's see if we can put these together. One time, so this is 110. And this is 150. Okay. And that would give us 25% of 260,000. Right? I'm sure I did that right. Yeah, that looks right. 20, see, 30, so yeah, 260,000. Okay. And the expected value of one employee is then 65,000. Okay, so the expected value of an employee is somewhere in the middle of this employee value, and then we know the expected value of 5 employees is just 5 times this. Yeah. Because on average, they're gonna, come out to their probabilities. 325.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I guess the point of this question is if you're a hiring manager, and you have some probability distributions, you can predict somewhat of the value of the new hire. Like, if you have 100 employees and the breakdown is like, 25% of them are generating this much value and so on, then you could predict that, like, okay, if I hire someone else, there's a 25% chance of each of these things, and the expected value for an employee is 65,000, somewhere in the middle. Okay. All right, so last chapter or concept was moral hazard, and this is can refer to the reduced incentive to exercise care once you purchase insurance. But I think the better definition was comparing it to adverse selection. So both moral hazard and adverse selection are related. They both arise from information asymmetry, like you don't know the full set of information, or at least somebody doesn't. Adverse selection arises from hidden information about the type of individual we're dealing with, and moral hazard arises from hidden actions. So I'm gonna just highlight this because I think this is so good. So, okay, so some examples, some simpler examples, and then the big example that we've been referring to are, so this, you don't know, like sometimes an action has, I guess, unforeseen consequences. So these two are kind of related, airbags and seatbelts. So the airbag and seatbelts example were like airbags and seatbelts were both meant to prevent accidents. But what wasn't foreseen was that with airbags and with seatbelts, that the drivers felt a little more safe. And so I think the research would show that airbags and seatbelts have definitely prevented more severe accidents. But I think, as a result of these two things, there's been more minor accidents. Because the behavior of I guess both these things are required now, if I'm not mistaken. I know seatbelts are, but cars have to have airbags, right? No?
I'd imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that like you'll see people driving like a 57 Chevy, they don't have, they're just, they got nothing for security, but for new cars, I think the mandate of the airbag and the seatbelt has done its job in preventing more fatal accidents. So those have definitely gone down, I think. But what we've seen is because of the, security of the airbag and the seatbelt, that there's been a higher tendency of smaller accidents. At least that's what, I don't have the research on it. You could also make the argument that because of airbags and seatbelts, there's been more cars on the road since that time, so that would also skew the results. So just a caveat of there could be hidden actions with these policies that weren't foreseen by California or whoever, but so it's not just that, airbags are the same thing with like uh, there's the energy efficiency thing where like if you get let's say you have a light bulb that lasts 1 year and you get a new one that lasts 10 years, you're probably just gonna use it more, right? So it's more efficient, but that doesn't prevent you from using it more. Right? Yeah, and then the last thing, just going back to the financial crisis, and I think we talked about this before, but the moral hazard thing was that the um we didn't realize, or we should have realized that the individuals that were making all these decisions uh had a had in their back pocket that they had a chance of bailout, but if they succeeded, they got to eat all the success. And so not accounting for that information led to a much bigger problem because, if they were held accountable for losing as much as they were for gaining, then they wouldn't have likely taken as many risky decisions. But because there was a huge reward for, succeeding, you get to keep all the profits. And if, these big banks didn't make it because of the economic effects on the economy, uh, there was a likelihood of a bailout. They weren't, what wasn't seen as like, these bankers were smart in that sense, knowing that like, even if I fail, we'll get bailed out. The US government's gonna not let all these huge banks go under. And so not seeing that situation was the moral hazard because uh, there were actions where, you know, the the gains from success were much different than the thought experiment of if we lose, oh well, like the government will bail us out. So anyway, I think that's it. Unless there's any additional questions on either. We talked about bargaining. We talked about uncertainty. We talked about, well, we didn't really talk about auctions, but that's chapter 18. I read through it and didn't have anything really to discuss, but if you're interested, that's chapter 18. Then adverse selection, and finally, I think moral hazard was chapter 20. So we've covered, a good portion of your textbook. In particular, okay, so we're in chapter 20. There's a couple more chapters if you're interested in finishing it up, just for, check it off your list, but there's only, looks like 3 more chapters, and then I doubt any of you are going to test yourself, but if you want to, that's chapter 24. All right. So as a reminder, okay, so we're just about done here. Again, homework 3 grades should be up. And at this point, you should have all your grades except for the final. The final's due today, so you can email that to me if you haven't done so already. And again, I'll try to get your grades in by the 15th. Okay, sound good? Okay. All right, well, I think that's it. And thank you all for a good class, and hopefully you learn something. And let me know if you have any questions about the final. But if not, we can wrap it up.
All right, thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank-
Professor.
Thank you.
Dr. Hoffman.
Yeah.
I enjoyed myself.
I'm good. Thanks for coming for every class.
You teaching any more classes in
I'm not,
DBA?
I don't have any lined up for the next, what's it called? Term.
Mhm.
but I'll let you know. Or,
Yeah, very good.
yeah,
Well, thank you. Hope to see you again.
yeah. All right, thank you.
There.